Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us at PMM Fest. Before this session starts, I just wanted to say a big thank you to all our sponsors, our partners, you, our festival attendees, and all our speakers too, because without all of you guys, none of this could have gone ahead and be the success that it has been. If you've not already checked it out, do check out our AMA site. Lots of our speakers will be heading over there after their sessions to take your questions and give their answers. So yeah, head over to the AMA site. That's all from me today. Enjoy the session.
Hi everyone, I'm Christina. So like was just mentioned, I think customers and the voice of the customer has been a common theme that we've seen today. And one thing that I want to do in my presentation is actually talk a little bit about how to actually incorporate the voice of the customer into your product marketing strategy. So these are 3 companies that I've actually worked for in my career. And I would say that all 3 of them were customer-centric or considered themselves customer-centric. So at HubSpot, I'm sure we're marketers here in the room, right? We're familiar with HubSpot. It was always the marketers, right? It was even internally, we were a marketing-centric organization. All of our decisions internally were made based on what the marketing team thought, which was awesome for us, right, as marketers, and externally. So marketers were really the forefront of everything we did. We were always listening to them. And as a marketer, it was actually really easy to be that voice because we knew what we were doing and I knew what marketers were basically thinking, right? So Stack Overflow, which I don't know how many of you guys are familiar, but it's an online developer community. So there, the developers were really the customers, and they were super focused on developers. Our CEO was a developer. Developers were super highly regarded at the company. So everything that we did, we always had the developer at the front of our mind. And Amazon. So the reason I put all customers is because at Amazon, obviously, probably everyone here in the room knows what Amazon is. There's millions of products, right, that we produce internally. And I actually work on the Audible for Business team. So it's actually a new team within Amazon. It's part of Audible. But it creates an interesting challenge because even though our customers, it's a B2B product, we're actually stemmed and spun off of a B2C product. So in that case, we have to think about the customer that's an Audible user. Most of those customers are actually Prime members, right? So we have to think about how they're Prime users. And then we also have to think about that all of our accounts and anyone who's creating accounts is actually creating an Amazon account. So show of hands in the room, how many of you have an Amazon account? Right? Almost everyone. So that's why when talking about Amazon and in general, no matter what part of the business people work on, I really like to say that really they're marketing to all customers, and customer obsession is actually one of our principles internally that we really talk about. So that's actually kind of what inspired me to this talk. So I'm gonna just quickly run through these, but I'm sure all of you have heard at least one of these ways to capture customer feedback. It's either interviews, surveys, listening to the voice of the customer through maybe forums. You have product feedback pages on your website. You're part of customer communities. I think that at one point in my career, I've probably done all of these, but the challenge for me, and I don't know how many people face the same challenge, but it was also how do I do the interview with the customer at the right point in time? How do I actually get insights from those interviews and apply it to my product, right? How do my feature request form, right? We have an instance now where we have a sales team, right? And they're always putting in feature requests from customers. How do I actually make sure that those feature requests make it into the product and they don't just sit there, right? Because otherwise the customer will realize that you don't actually care about any of their features. So I think one thing I want to talk about today and focus on is the challenge of using customer insights effectively. And I think there are a lot of different teams within organizations that talk to the customer. If you have a customer success team, if you have a sales team, your CEO or someone on your executive board might be talking to the customer. But I do really think that as product marketers, we're the uniquely positioned to solve the challenge of bringing and bridging that gap of customer insights. And I really like this graph here. I pulled it from Drift, which is also another marketing platform, but it kind of shows how, and product marketing is in the center of everything, right? So we touch sales, we touch marketing, we touch product, and we hear conversations both on the product side and on the sales side, and also on the marketing side. And I think because of that, we're really uniquely positioned to be the voice of the customer and really think about, okay, I'm hearing this, how do I actually get it to the product? Or I'm hearing this from sales, how do I really come back and make sure we have a closed loop feedback? So listening to the customer. So I'm going to talk about a couple of different ways that you can use customer insights at every stage of the product marketing strategy. So the first one, product and feature development process. So a show of hands, how many of you as product marketers are actually right now involved in some sort of product feature development? A good number of you, right? And the reason I like to ask that is because I think it's super important to start at this is not just for this talk, but in general for product marketing, really start at the beginning of the product development process. So start by listening to customers early on, even before the product is built. So this chart up here I actually liked because it's all the different ways that product development works. And I actually think as a product marketer, if you understand that and you understand where that voice of the customer fits in, you'll really set yourself up for success. So like I said, get involved as early as possible. By the time the product roadmap is set, it's oftentimes too late. So we'll have salespeople right now in my organization that come and say, well, our customer really wants this feature. How come we're not focusing on this feature this quarter, right? And we kind of say, well, did you follow the process that we have set up internally, which is taking feature requests up to a certain date, and then they'll be considered for that quarter. But that way, we actually know that we're developing the product roadmap based on something that the customer is saying. Because a lot of the times, like that slide that I showed with all the different ways you can get the voice of the customer, if you do an interview and the product roadmap is set for the next year, it's going to be super, super hard for you to actually get that into the product and actually feel like the customer voice is being heard. So I would say also one thing that we do right now and that we did at Stack Overflow specifically was partnering with product managers to put the customer first at every stage of the development process. And depending on the product you have, that could look very different, right? It could be that you sit with a product manager, and if you work at a small company, you just sit one-on-one, right, and kind of like flesh out ideas, and it's very collaborative. It could be that you work at a large companies like I do, right? And the product team is way over here and there's all these red tape and all that good stuff that comes with a big organization. But at the same time, you still want to have that relationship with the product manager, and that will let you kind of get in early. So right now, what we do at my company, and specifically in my department at Audible for Business, is we actually have a prioritization meeting every quarter with the product manager, and we involve the head of product marketing, a sales stakeholder, a customer success stakeholder, and a customer service stakeholder. And with those people, we have a prioritization rubric where we basically map out, okay, for this next product roadmap that we're creating, it could be yearly, it could be quarterly, it could be weekly if you're shipping things very quickly. How are we going to prioritize this? And we actually have a customer section. So we have a section that talks about, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this for our customers? And we measure that by a couple different things. 1, how many people have called into support about it. 2, how many salespeople have submitted a form and said this is what the customer actually uses. And the third, which I think is really interesting, is we have an online forum where people can submit requests, and they're anonymous, but they kind of upvote requests sometimes, and it will take the top 2 and put that as the #1 priority. And that's what I was talking about earlier, just creating a scalable product feedback strategy. So how many of you guys are involved in product and feature go-to-markets? I think that's probably really the core of product marketing is go-to-market. And that's really taking the product to market, right? So in terms of the customer voice, I think that obviously we always think about who we're marketing to or who we're going to market with, but I think it's also important to think about go-to-market plans as customer first, right? So here are a bunch of different things that go into a go-to-market plan, right? Who are you selling to? what is the product, when should we launch it, why do prospects need it, and why do current customers need that? Because I actually think that's something that people often forget is like current customers. Where can we reach these people? How do we go to market? And what you can do from here is pull out and think about things in the lens of the customer. And it's kind of interesting and tricky sometimes because a lot of the times a go-to-market plan is thinking about the product, right? And the product is really at the core. What functionality is new? Where are we going to market it, right? What social channels, what events are we going to go to? But if you think of it in the lens of the customer and what the customer has actually been saying and all of this feedback that you were gathering that I showed on the other slide, I think it can actually help put the customer first. So for example, if you're saying like, when should we launch this, right? So at Amazon, we know that we have Black Friday. That's not something that I work on, but it's a huge company-wide initiative. So us launching something is probably not the best experience for the customer, right? Because we're going to be competing with another thing that's going on at Amazon. Another thing is like, how do we go to market? And a lot of the times we try to think about, okay, the market for us is very, very saturated because with that Amazon account, so many parts of Amazon are actually trying to target you all at the same time. So we actually have to fight for a share of that Amazon account and say like, okay, at what time is the best time for the customer to actually release this product? Like I mentioned, Black Friday, not a good time, but how are we going to even reach them? Is it going to be on Amazon.com? Is it going to be through like a Prime newsletter? Are we going to do like a cross promotion? So we kind of have an internal market within ourselves, but it does create a lot of challenges and really forces us to think about the customer first and really think about, okay, what is going to be the best experience for that customer? So product and feature launches. I want to talk a little bit more about the launch process itself because I do think it's really important and somewhere that product marketing can actually have a real impact. So we like to say that you should set up your customer up for success from day one. So what that really means, right, is predicting maybe how the launch is going to affect the customer, right? So if I'm going to make up numbers, $10.99, right, for Prime, am I going to want to pay another $10 for Audible, right? Those things cost different things, and are we actually going to be competing for that same customer share? I also think a lot of the time new products come out and we always try to think about the prospect first, like I mentioned before, but I think it's really important to also focus on existing customers because that can actually affect your retention, your adoption of the product, and at the end of the day, your current customer is your biggest advocate, right? Like I was saying, preparing your existing customers for launch. One thing that we actually like to do, which we found really useful, is basically pre-launching. Someone earlier was talking about like different phases of launches and stuff like that, but actually pre-launching to our customers and giving them a heads up always. And that way we can see how they react. So we try to do like maybe a month before we'll launch a new feature, kind of do a closed beta, but within our actually customer pool, and then see how those customers react. And then we'll actually shift and change things based on that. And then another piece here is setting up your internal teams for success. So like I mentioned, we have a lot of different teams like sales, people in customer service, customer success, just making sure that they're all aware that the product is launching. I know it sounds really, really simple, but in a big company or even in a small company, sometimes it falls through the cracks and creates a poor customer experience. And I think the most important thing is really measuring the impact that launches have on the customer. So obviously we're always talking about revenue metrics for sales and stuff like that, but I think measuring things that are a little more qualitative, like how is this affecting your day-to-day, and really closing the loop with sales, which I'll talk about in a second, but that can really help your launch and feature really roadmap and just showing results for the customer. So now I want to dive into sales and customer success feedback loop because I think this is something that product marketing can have a huge impact on, and I think that's not talked about enough. We talk a lot about this. So on this slide, everyone in sales, not everyone, but many people in sales and customer success, we always say that we want the feedback of the customer, right? At least our salespeople always say that we're customer obsessed. We really want your customer feedback, and we're definitely going to prioritize that. But Obviously, that's not true, right? For like all customers, we can't prioritize every single customer request. And I think one thing that comes out of this is actually don't ask for feedback just to ask, right? Because in that case, the customer voice, if someone's telling you something and you're not actioning on it at all, that actually creates a really negative experience for the customer and can a lot of times really sway the way that they look at your product and consider you not customer-centric if you're not listening to them. So I think one thing that we've done really well, at least on my team, is create a process that sales, customer success, and product that really closes the loop with customers. So what do I mean by that? That means when a salesperson asks for feedback or when a customer gives us feedback, we have something called a feedback tracker, which is in Salesforce, which most salespeople use at our company. And we actually have that report run in Salesforce and notify every single day the customer success team, product, marketing, everyone that a piece of feedback has been given. No matter how small, no matter how big the feedback is, we always put it in this feedback tracker and then basically run the report daily that automatically notifies us that this feedback has been given. That way, if on a certain day, or say after a feature launch, right, and everyone gives the same feedback, we can actually see and track kind of what days are more feedback, what days are less, is the feedback all the same, and we actually really need to fix something or something is broken. And then what we do from there is we have a meeting, a monthly meeting with our product team where we actually go through all of the feedback and make sure that we kind of either decide that we don't want to address it, right? Because again, I said you can't address everyone's feedback. 2, pick at least one thing from there that we're actually going to action on if we can. And then the third thing, which I think is most important, is that any time that we have a feature launch or a product launch or something new comes up, we always tell the salesperson who actually requested that feedback or put it in the tracker, or if it was customer service, customer success, we actually tell them to go back to the customer and tell them, hey, this feature is launching. Thank you for your feedback. This is something that you actually requested in the process. And that's what I mean by closing the loop. A lot of the times in my past roles, we've had similar things, but we never actually close the loop. We never let the customer know that, hey, your feedback, we actually, actioned on it, which is awesome and what the customer really wants. So that's what I was talking about earlier. And then working in lockstep with sales and product to prioritize this feedback, I think is also super important. And like I mentioned, that's kind of how we address it in our monthly meetings. And then the last thing I'll talk about, and then I'll leave 5 minutes for questions, is just continuously prioritizing the customer. And I definitely understand, right, like at Amazon, it's something that's ingrained in our kind of DNA, the way we interview, hire people, it's all about the customer. But I do think there are ways that product marketing can really help continuously prioritize the customer and really become that voice of the customer inside your organization. So really, like I was saying, empowering your company to put the customer first. Like I mentioned in some of the previous slides, I think buy-in is super important. So working with all the stakeholders in that cross-functional diagram that I showed, right? We're in the middle, so we actually touch every single piece of the team a lot of the time. So I think getting buy-in and alignment from all those people to really focus and think about the customer is important. I would also say that measuring the impact that it has on revenue. So like I was saying earlier, if we give customers a heads up, right, when a new feature launches, we record basically and measure how customers respond to the features. Do they upsell? Do they downgrade after each feature and product launch? And I think really measuring the impact that has on the customer is really important and can help you prove that the customer is really important. And then establishing processes that are scalable and iterating when they don't work. So I think the biggest challenge everyone was talking about earlier too, that product marketers are super busy. We have so many things on our plate. So I think establishing quick and easy processes that are actually going to work for you is super interesting and important. Like I said, this feedback tracker that we've established. It's something that I honestly don't think about now on a daily basis. I think about it when the feedback comes to me, but I'm not thinking about like, how is this going to work? When am I going to get this feedback? And I think that can actually save a lot of time for us as product marketers. I also think it's important to experiment a little and see what works and doesn't work. At my last company, we had another feedback tracker process, but it was basically sales inputting into a spreadsheet, right? And then no one ever looked at that spreadsheet because they just put it in and we're all so busy, no one ever took a look, and customers would actually get frustrated. So we tried to kind of iterate on that process and see where the gaps were missing. And then the last thing here is just when making decisions, consider customers and their needs. So if you're deciding what kind of marketing campaign to put out, think about how your customers are going to react. When you're deciding kind of what sales talk track, maybe some of you work on sales enablement, what talk track to put together, think about how the customer is going to react to what they're saying if they get it forwarded from another prospect, right? So in the back of your mind, I think in product marketing specifically, it's super important to put the customer first and really be that advocate for the customer inside the company. And that's it. Thank you.
Come your way. I think there's the magical question cube is over here.
Thank you. Hey, thank you.
Yeah.
I had heard, and if it's not true, you correct me if I'm wrong, that Amazon in general puts no effort into competitive intelligence because you're so obsessed with the customer. And it's pretty opposite of how we work and how sounds like other companies work as well. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that and if it's true.
That's a good question. So I would say a common misconception about Amazon generally is that everything works as a holistic unit, right? So like if I'm on this team and we don't do competitive intelligence at all, then I don't either, right? But my team actually does. Because we're a new product, so Audible for Business, I'm sure none of you have even heard of that yet, right? It's basically Audible, which is the audiobook for businesses, and we sell to like large B2B enterprises. We actually are doing a ton of competitive intelligence right now because it's a totally new product and we need to figure out, okay, is LinkedIn Learning, right, like competing with us? Who are our competitors? So I would say like probably people think that about Amazon is just because it's already established in the market and there are no real competitors. But my personal opinion is that there's always competitors, right? If you ignore competitors, people are going to creep up. So we personally on my team, we actually do a lot. Sure, if you want to. It'll take me longer.
You were mentioning the feature prioritization rubric. I wondered if you could share a little more about what some of the categories were, or if you maybe wanted to send it to people.
Yeah, I can definitely send it out. Yeah, it's something we use all the time. But it's like customer impact. It's how long it's actually going to take the dev team to build it. So like size. It's also what's been on the feature prioritization list the longest, right? So like there's some things that are always like, oh, this isn't important, right? But then it creeps up. And then obviously like impact on revenue is another one. But yeah, I'm happy to send it out. I can send it to Josie.
Hi, you mentioned that you do pre-launch, like before the feature, the actual market launch, you do a pre-launch. How do you market that? Do you just do an email? Do you put in a product? Like, how do you do that? In our case, I'm always afraid to do that because our product management team will not meet the date. And we don't want to say, oh, we have this great thing coming out, and then it's in 5 weeks, and then 7 weeks go by, and the thing never came out. So how do you do the pre-launch, and does it really work? Do people really get excited about new features coming?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We actually have the same problem. I mean, everyone here does. Product team says they're going to put it out this day, and then it's 3 years later and it's still not there. But so the way that we do it is we pick and choose which clients we do it with and what the launches are. If it's a giant announcement, right, like that we've been working on for like 1 or 2 years, that's one thing, and we're pretty confident it's going to launch in a certain date. If the launch is risky, might not happen, we definitely won't do that just because it's risky for the customer too. But the way that we do that when we do it is we do it through email for the customer. We also we don't do this here, but I have done it in the past, is like we'd have like a customer portal that people can log into, where they like manage their users and all of that stuff. We do like an announcement there, but we also kind of sometimes do it very selectively. Like we try to pick and choose different types of customers and have it be really personal and actually say, hey, we've chosen you as one of our customers. Can you provide feedback on this and stuff like that? Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
So I have a question. So you mentioned that we'd like to incorporate customer voice throughout the whole cycle of product development, especially from the beginning of product development. And just curious, so we know that there are always realized unmet customer needs that customers can tell you, but there's also unrealized unmet customer needs, and business needs to be forward-looking. And a lot of times customers might not be as forward-looking as the business. And if we just blindly incorporate customer feedback, we might not be able to compete effectively with competitors by being really forward-looking. So can you comment on how do you strike the balance there?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And actually, like, I don't know how many of you know this, but Amazon has like a bunch of different principles, right, that they like base all of their decisions on and how they hire people. One of them is actually articulate the possible and move fast to make it real. And the other one is anticipate needs and act before they ask. So that one, I think in particular, is really balancing what you're saying, the customer and their voice, but also anticipating their needs. And the way that we try to do that is, like I was saying with the feature prioritization, we basically assign like a number, right, to each customer request or customer feedback. And that's part of the equation, right? It's not all of it. And then in terms of anticipating what people say and ask is really done through like market research and our leadership, right? So if our leadership says like, we're building this and the customer's absolutely against it, then that's like a balance in a conversation. But I do think you're right. It's not, you can't just always build what the customer says.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.